Hello, welcome back. Today we will discuss another um, product design interview question. Today I have listed down the question of design a fire alarm for the deaf people. This is typically asked at Google. So we'll figure out what can the solution be here. Before beginning introduction, I'm Karan. I'm currently a product manager at Wolt. It is DoorDash in Germany. I'm based in Germany. And before Wolt, I worked in analytical consulting in McKinsey and Company back in India, and moved directly from McKinsey to Germany into this product management space. So if anyone has any questions related to cracking product management without necessarily doing an MBA or with no prior product management experience, definitely reach out. Apart from that, uh, I'm also actually doing some mocks, like one-to-one mock interviews with different people, just to gain mutual practice of how can I run interviews and get better practice. And these mocks are free. Um, I do not want to pay anyone. And at the same time, I do not want to expect anyone to pay me. So we could probably spend 1 hour or let's say 75 minutes and do interview on both the sides so that we can benefit with PM interview practice. So for that, the link is in the description, the Calendly link. So you can set up a meeting if you would like. Okay, with that, let's start with the product design interview question. Yeah, design a fire alarm for the deaf. I'll also start the timer. Okay, so in order to begin with the fire alarm for the deaf question, let's at least have like a higher level approach that we will follow in this discussion. And it would be um, aligning on the context or clarifying the details. Then let's go towards the goal of why we want to actually why does Google want to do it, or is it just like a generic question? If it is a generic question, pretty cool, and I think we should definitely solve for it. Then let's go to users, understand their pain points, which in this case is definitely deaf, but are we thinking of any specific segment within the deaf population? So let's look at them. And finally, once we align on one particular pain point, after prioritization, we come up with a few solutions and then eventually prioritize a solution and come up with success matrix and risks to close the discussion for today's interview. Okay, so context. Let's first of all define deaf. So, I mean, deaf people are definitely people who have hearing disabilities, but are we talking about 100% disability or partial? So, in this case, let's assume 100% hearing disability for convenience of this discussion. Then let's go to fire alarm. Um, so I'm assuming like fire alarm is usually a device that is installed in homes, offices for emergencies. Definitely, it's mostly like a physical device that also relies on sound. In particular, whenever there is a possibility, whenever the fire alarm detects smoke or fire, it goes on and the sound starts. And the sound turns on, and that is basically the trigger for people to escape from that particular situation. So here, let's assume that it is a physical device and it relies on sound. But again, because we are designing a fire alarm for the deaf, we need to figure out what can we do here. Okay, no need to actually figure out any particular geography. Let's think of any other clarifying questions. And just to keep things clear, let's also think not only on a physical product side, but it could also be like a software or a digital product. So the fire alarm, usually conventionally it is a physical product, but let's also keep the scope open and say that it could either be a physical or a digital product. Okay. Now, I think the context is pretty much clear. Let's look at the goal. Now, my first question is this a product? Is this fire alarm like a product that Google wants to build, or is just, is this just for the purpose of this interview that we are trying to, build a fire alarm product, and it's probably like a new company or a new startup that is looking to build this. So just for simplicity, I would assume that it is not necessarily Google that wants to build this, but rather like a new startup or just a company that wants to build this. And because it's a new startup, my assumption is also that it is definitely aligning with the mission of the company, and we should probably not delve deeper into this because I do not know the mission of this new particular startup. um, okay, so now let's actually get into. So new startup, social benefit. So let's get into the user segments. We are definitely talking about people that have hearing disability, and that to 100% hearing disability. Here in this situation, I could probably segment um, the deaf people into multiple age groups. And why am I intentionally doing that? Because there could be an elderly age group where they might face additional difficulties in terms of, let's say, reaching to reaching to a fire alarm, which is probably stuck. It is probably fixated at the top of the roof. There could be some problems. So let's just keep um, two segments based on age. One is elderly versus adults plus teens. So this is one segmentation. What else? There is also like a worst case possibility that deaf hearing disability is not the only disability in that particular individual. It could be, let's say, physical disability such as not being able to walk. So physical walking disability could be one possibility. It could also be possible that the individual is blind. So just for simplicity, for the purpose of this conversation, I am making sure that there is honestly no individual for the purpose of this conversation that is blind and deaf at the same time. So keeping this out of scope. But let's actually keep the physical walking disability in scope and try to also create our product thinking that, okay, there are these edge cases where we need to consider the product to be more accessible. Okay, what else? Um, I think that should be pretty much it. And again, in terms of prioritization, we are obviously talking about the deaf people. At the same time, uh, let's consider the worst case scenarios of elderly people and physical walking disability people, just so that if we cover our product given considering these segments in mind, we'll obviously be able to cover the adults and teens deaf people already. So let's keep that in mind, and we have prioritized this particular user segment. Okay, what could be the situations, or let's say the use cases in which these users might be stuck when there is, let's say, a fire setting? So one could be, let's say they are cooking, they are in the kitchen, let's say they are in the uh, bathroom, let's assume that they're sleeping. In these situations, um, so for example, in the sleeping situation, they cannot leverage uh, eyesight uh, signals. Here they might be distracted. It's quite possible that they miss the eyesight signals. Possible to miss eyesight signals. And then in cooking, same situation. Possible that they might miss eyesight signals. So this is what we also need to keep in mind while figuring out. our next section, which is pain points. Okay. So what happens in the case of a fire? So in the case of a fire, the first problem is that I cannot detect whether there is a fire, or let's say there is a fire alarm on. And in this situation, there could be false alarm versus actual fire. Now, so the first problem is detection. The second problem is, once I come to know that the fire alarm is on, if let's say I'm an elderly or I'm a physical walking disability person, I cannot easily escape the place. Okay. And in particular, given that our situations are more home focused, we need to make sure that we are not talking about, let's say, an office setting. And I should also probably mention it. Let's keep office or any setting where the deaf individual is accompanied by somebody. So this is technically out of scope. The whole situation is out of scope. Let's consider the home situation that I have mentioned here. Home situation in which the deaf person, the individual is alone and cannot get any help from any other person. So if let's say the deaf person is also has a physical walking disability, they might not find it easy to escape the place. So that's another problem. The final problem could be I cannot mm, I cannot detect, I cannot escape. And I think that should be pretty much it in terms of broader buckets. So in this particular situation, let me actually focus on the first pain point, because based on the parameters of severity of the pain, let's include the second parameter as prevalence of the pain point. And the third parameter could be, can we address this pain point? Can this particular product address this pain point? And finally, is this pain point aligned with the goal? So it's definitely aligned with both the pain points are aligned with the goal. Both the pain points are definitely addressable. But the main point here is that the first pain point is actually more prevalent than the latter, because I cannot easily escape the place is possibly only applicable for people with, let's say, physical walking disability and blind people on the likes. So it's even a very small population segment. So let's try to focus on the deaf people overall. So it's a larger target addressable market. Okay. Now, within this particular pain point of I cannot detect whether there is a fire alarm on, there would obviously be all of these situations possible. Let's say the deaf individual is sleeping, or and then cannot open their eyes to check for the signal. The second one could be they are in such in a particular room of the house where they could potentially be distracted and could not identify those signals, fire alarm signals. Okay, so let's get to solutions. Let me also keep a check on the time. Okay, so it's 13 minutes on. So let's target this first, false alarm versus actual fire. Do we really need a solution that solves for a pain point that says that helps the deaf individual identify what is a fire alarm, what is a false fire alarm versus what is an actual fire alarm. I believe that it is not necessary. Even in the case of a false fire alarm, it's probably in the best interest of the deaf individual that they consider it as a proper fire and escape the place. So it's going to be crucial. It's totally fine that we can ignore this aspect just because of the lower importance of the pain point here. Another piece could be, do I have to turn off the alarm? So maybe I could even write it. I cannot turn off the fire alarm, particularly in the case of false alarm. So I think even the turning off of the alarm is probably not necessary or not very, very important, because if it's a false alarm, I think the first call to action should be that they escape the place instead of finding a way to actually turn off the fire alarm. They might also need to use their own judgment. So they might need to use their own judgment to understand whether it's actually a false alarm, or maybe they are making a wrong decision that it is a false alarm, and it turns out to be an actual fire. So let's not get into that level of situation where, okay, we are letting the deaf individual to make their own judgment, particularly in such a so-called panic situation. Okay, and that is why I would also probably deprioritize this particular pain point. And obviously we are focusing on, I cannot detect whether there is a fire alarm on. So let's consider the sleeping scenario. Now, in the sleeping scenario, I cannot leverage my visual signals. So, and I'll obviously be sleeping in a particular room. So maybe I would probably use like a vibration mechanism in some way or the other. So the first one that I can possibly think of is wearables that essentially vibrates. So let's assume that the fire alarm is connected to my watch or even my mobile phone. So wearables plus mobile phone vibration. So we need to rely on that. But what if I'm not wearing my wearable, and what if the mobile phone vibration is not good enough? Then probably an extreme not necessarily an extreme, but probably like an aggressive move here. We could possibly leverage something on an IoT perspective and make, let's say, the bed to vibrate or to literally shake, or something similar, so that the signal is so strong that we are able to make sure that the deaf individual is able to get up from their sleep and take the necessary action. So I think this is going to be crucial. Then let's assume, let's say, the cooking slash bathroom or any other distraction related scenarios. In these scenarios, I think the best go-to signal would be the visual signal. So something like a siren that usually is on top of an ambulance or a police car. So a siren with visual signal. It could be red or blue or something pretty bright, and it is installed in each and every room slash corner of the house. So that is another important thing. And in this particular case, there is a very, very high possibility that I would not be distracted either I'm in the bathroom or in the kitchen cooking and things like that. I would make sure that I get the visual signal. So this is another way. And the wearable slash mobile phone vibration definitely definitely solves for the cooking and the bathroom scenario as well. So if I have my wearable on and if I have my mobile phone turned on, I can make sure I will be able to I will be able to get the fire alarm signal. What else? What if nothing works? Another thing that could be done here is send SOS to 5 neighbors and even the fire department, let's say, and obviously family members, family/friends. Like more than fire department, family/friends, because they might be far away. Like sending the SOS to neighbors is pretty crucial, and the call to action should be very, very clear here from our side that if we have you as the SOS individual for supporting this deaf person, you need to make sure that you are immediately leaving all of the work and actually going to the deaf individual's place to help them out. I think that should be the major call to action here. And yeah, but again, this is in the situation where nothing works out. Okay. Um, what if we are now considering, let's say, the elderly or the physical walking disability? What would happen in those scenarios? In those scenarios, like let's say there is a physical walking disability. Now, in that particular case, I would also make sure that if they are on a wheelchair, it vibrates and shakes just so that they get the visual, or let's say the vibrating signal. Uh, Wearables plus mobile phone vibration would be applicable for them. And siren with visual signal would also be applicable. And because we are not necessarily worried about turning off the fire alarm, we should not be worried about saying that, okay, physical walking disability people might not be able to turn off the fire alarm. Yes, it is true, but again, it is a very low pain point problem for us to cater to. Okay, so these are the 4 different solutions. Let's now think of the prioritization based on impact, effort. Let's see that whether it actually solves the pain point we prioritize and it helps with the goal. So impact, this is definitely going to be a high impact. And the effort should not be necessarily high, so it should be low, and it definitely solves the pain point and it is aligned with the goal. Now for IoT, it is definitely higher impact, but the prevalence of this use case where they are either sleeping or let's say distracted in some way or the other is going to be obviously low. So that is something that we need to consider. So prevalence will be low. Effort not necessarily high, but again, it introduces that the another expense that, okay, let's assume that a bed that vibrates, probably they have to replace their existing bed, or let's say let's say assume that they have to purchase a mattress that possibly vibrates in these situations. So that is something which obviously brings in additional cost. So the cost would be a factor here to consider. Let's just write it. Additional cost, which might obviously be higher than the conventional fire alarm product that we are thinking of. So impact is definitely high, prevalence is low, and effort might be, effort should be low because we're just introducing like a vibrating mechanism here. Yes, it does solve the pain point, and yes, it definitely solves the goal. But again, cost is something that we should consider. Okay, siren with visual signal. I think this is probably the best solution so far because visual signals is something that stark visual signals is definitely something that can be high impact, low effort, definitely solves the problem and aligns with the goal. Now, this is moderate impact just because the prevalence is low. And in fact, just because the prevalence is low here, I should also keep this as moderate impact, given that the prevalence is low. And SOS to 5 neighbors is okay. Fire department is also okay. So sending the messages is not, sending messages to relevant people is not going to be that big of a problem. So the effort should be low here, but the impact is moderate, because if nothing of the above works, then only we will probably try to come to the solution. So that's essentially the analysis of each and every solution. To prioritize, I would actually go with this one because it is prevalent. It is more impactful than the wearables and mobile phone vibration, um, particularly because if the siren with visual signal is stark enough, it is bold enough, it should be able to help us with all of the situations. Obviously, one situation is present where, let's say, in the sleeping situation, will not be able to help the individual, and for that particular use case, again, where the prevalence becomes low, where that there is a fire that actually happens uh, between 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. to 6, 7 a.m. and things go bad. But for majority of the situation, give considering that fire comes off in daylight, usually when the person is awake, we will go with that assumption and prioritize this particular solution. Okay. Success matrix. So the biggest success metric here is that there are no hazards, no fire hazards um, for deaf people wherever this fire alarm is installed. So that would be the major metric I would be looking at. What other tracking or supporting matrix I should check? Let's see. So if we are talking about this particular solution, siren with a visual signal installed in each and every room and corner. So let's also check, let's say, particularly in case of false alarms, are the deaf people actually catching the visual signal and turning off the alarm? So it will give us an understanding of the false alarm uh, situation. False alarm percentage. And if, let's say, we are also going with this particular solution, wearables plus mobile phone integration of the fire alarm, then we could also check the engagement that happens on the mobile phone or on the wearable. So maybe there is some sort of a that tracks sensor that tracks um, the frequency of, let's say, a wearable that's been worn by the individual. Like, what is the time worn of wearable? And let's also say just the usual interactions of the deaf individual on the fire alarm app integration on mobile. Guardrail, something that I would be uh, cautious about is, does the fire alarm by any means create too many false alarms? So is the fire alarm inaccurate by any means? Yeah. Risks. should be approved by fire ministry or the government. Need to make sure of that. In such cases, we should also make sure that the turnaround time for those specific individuals, so basically get extra approval to prioritize these individuals to get fire department support. I think this should be possible, but again, something to consider. And obviously getting those SOS for 5 neighbors is also going to be critical. So SOS support will require ops effort. Yeah, and I think this should be pretty much it. Okay, so fire alarm product for the deaf. Then particularly for elderly, like all sorts of deaf people, but specifically also trying to cover those corner cases of elderly and physical walking disability. Mostly relied on detection problem, and that too in home situation, not necessarily anywhere else where they're alone technically. And for this particular problem, we decided that we will look at the visual signals mainly. And if there is a possibility to consider, let's say, beyond the visual signal, then we could say that this is the MVP, and then we would probably go to the wearables for mobile phone thing as phase one. We also saw some bold solutions such as IoT for a vibrating shaking mechanism in bed on wheelchair to support the sleeping use case. But again, there is a risk of or additional cost in the solution, and the prevalence is obviously low. Looked at the success matrix. Obviously, with this product, do not want any fire hazards. That's the main thing. And obviously, some engagement related matrix could happen, like either on the false alarm side or even on the app integration side. Risks, discuss some particularly related to operations slash fire ministry stuff. And yeah, this is essentially our solution for fire alarm product for deaf people. Okay, 31 minutes. Sounds good. It should still probably have happened in roughly 25 minutes because this was a shorter question in comparison to other product design questions. Would have been better if I could have covered it in 25 minutes. Okay, great. That's it for this video. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you like the content, like kar dena, and also do subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want any specific question for any particular product management interview category. Currently I'm focusing on product design and product estimation, and moving forward I'll come up with new categories of product management interviews. And again, mock interviews, free mock interviews, if you're interested in practicing together. The link for the meeting Calendly is in the description. Book a slot, and we can practice these interviews together. All right. Thank you so much. See you in the next video. Bye.